Another pattern involves moral framing. The manipulator appeals to fairness, honesty, or responsibility to extract justification. You are told that a good person would explain that transparency is owed. This reframes refusal as guilt. When you comply, your explanation can then be dissected morally, turned against you, or reframed as an admission of fault. What began as cooperation becomes confession. Explanations are also frequently reframed after the fact. Words are quoted out of context, intentions are questioned, and nuance is stripped away. The more you say, the more material exists to be reinterpreted. Silence limits distortion. Minimalism protects against narrative hijacking. Calm refusal to explain disrupts all of these tactics. It removes the data source. Without justification, there is nothing to dissect, nothing to twist. The manipulator is forced to operate without insight, which increases risk and reduces precision. Often, their behavior escalates briefly more questions, sharper tone before collapsing. The lack of traction exposes the strategy. Importantly, refusal does not require hostility. It can be neutral, brief, and composed. The power comes not from confrontation, but from non-participation. You are not denying the other person's feelings or perspective. You are declining to submit your internal reasoning for evaluation. That distinction matters. Respect follows boundaries that are maintained without apology. When people see that explanations are not automatically available, they adjust. Some disengage. Others become more measured. The social environment reorganizes around the constraint. This is how authority is established, not through dominance displays, but through consistent refusal to be managed. In power dynamics, accessibility determines value. The more accessible your thoughts and motives, the less they are treated with care. Explanation makes you available. Restraint makes you formidable. Restraint is often mistaken for withdrawal, as if refusing to explain yourself means surrendering influence. In reality, restraint is how influence is reclaimed. When you stop defending your position, you stop letting others define the terms of engagement. You remain at the center of your own narrative, while everyone else is forced to operate around it. This is not silence as avoidance, but silence as authorship. Refusing to explain yourself prevents others from pulling you into their assumptions. Instead of being drawn inward to respond, correct, or justify, you remain outwardly still. That stillness creates space for projection. People begin to fill the gaps with their own interpretations, and in doing so, they reveal their beliefs, intentions, and biases. You learn more by observing than by reacting. Control shifts quietly, without confrontation. Authority does not come from winning arguments. It comes from self-definition. When you defend yourself, you imply that your identity or decision is up for debate. When you do not, you communicate that it is already settled. From a Machiavellian perspective, those in power define reality. They do not negotiate it. They allow others to adjust. Restraint signals certainty, and certainty is difficult to challenge. This certainty creates an aura that words cannot. A person who does not rush to clarify appears stable, grounded, unmoved by pressure. Others sense this and recalibrate. They speak more carefully. They test less. They hesitate before challenging, not because of intimidation, but because they cannot find leverage. The absence of explanation removes friction points. What remains is presence. However, restraint only works when it is supported internally. Silence without confidence collapses into awkwardness or resentment. Non-explanation without self-knowledge becomes avoidance. To use restraint as power, you must be comfortable with misunderstanding. You must trust your own reasoning enough to let it stand without endorsement. This requires emotional regulation and a clear sense of self. When you know who you are and why you act, you no longer need to perform coherence for others. The shift is subtle but profound. You move from needing to be understood to being self-contained. Understanding becomes optional, not required. You move from reaction to observation. Instead of preparing responses, you watch patterns emerge. You move from defense to presence. You are no longer trying to protect an image. You are occupying a position. This does not mean you never explain anything. It means explanations are given by choice, not compulsion. They are tools, not reflexes. You speak when it serves your intent, not when pressure demands it. That distinction changes everything. People can sense when access is conditional, and they respond with respect. In everyday interactions, restraint feels uncomfortable at first. Old habits surface. The urge to correct misunderstandings, to soften tension, to prove good intent. Resisting that urge is the practice. Each moment you pause instead of explaining strengthens your internal authority. Each moment you remain composed instead of reactive reshapes how others engage with you. Over time, the pattern becomes visible. Conversations shorten. Tests decrease. Challenges lose momentum. You are no longer pulled into invisible courtrooms. You are no longer managing other people's expectations of you. The dynamic shifts not because you asserted dominance, but because you stopped surrendering it. The challenge is simple but demanding. In the next moment, you feel the reflex to justify yourself. Pause. Say less than you want to, or say nothing at all. Observe what happens next. Watch who fills the silence, who retreats, who reveals themselves. Power does not announce itself. It accumulates quietly in the space where explanation used to be. You're standing there, heart beating faster than it should, mind racing to assemble the perfect response. Someone has questioned you, your decision, your intent, your character. You feel it instantly. A tightness in your chest, shallow breath, that sharp biological spike of cortisol, urging you to explain, justify, prove. This is the stress response activating, the ancient fear of being misjudged by the group. Your nervous system screams urgency. Say something. Clear it up. Defend yourself. And in that moment, before you speak, the trap is already set. Here's the truth most people never realize. Explaining yourself is not neutral. It is not harmless. It is a subconscious surrender of power. The instant you begin to justify who you are or why you acted, you accept that someone else has the authority to question you. Society conditions us to believe explanation equals maturity, fairness, transparency. We're taught from childhood that good people explain themselves. But in real power dynamics, explanation often signals insecurity, and insecurity invites judgment, correction, and control. This is where Machiavelli becomes relevant, not as a historian, but as a lens. He understood that power is rarely about truth. It is about who controls the frame. The moment you explain yourself, you step inside someone else's frame and grant them the role of judge. You are no longer acting, you are reacting. You are no longer leading, you are responding. This script will dismantle the myth that explanations protect you. It will expose why silence unsettles people and creates psychological dominance. It will reframe restraint not as weakness, but as an active strategy of authority. What follows will challenge habits formed in childhood, reinforced by social approval and mistaken for virtue, and once you see it, the way people look at you, speak to you, and test you will never be the same. Most people are taught that explaining themselves is a sign of intelligence, honesty, or emotional maturity. If you have nothing to hide, you clarify. If you are misunderstood, you correct the record. If you are confident, you communicate. On the surface, this sounds reasonable. But in real social dynamics, explanation is rarely perceived as strength. It is perceived as reaction. And reaction is never authority. Authority does not rush to clarify. It stands firm and lets others adjust. When you explain yourself, you are not presenting a position. You are responding to pressure. That pressure may be subtle or aggressive, but the psychological signal is the same. Your sense of legitimacy has been challenged, and you feel compelled to restore it. This communicates, often unconsciously, that your self-worth or credibility is negotiable, that it depends on whether others accept your reasoning. The moment you justify, you hand over leverage. Every explanation creates an invisible courtroom. One person speaks as if they are on trial. The other listens as if they are entitled to evaluate. This happens everywhere. In relationships, one partner demands explanations not to understand, but to gain emotional upper ground. In workplaces, managers ask for justifications not for clarity, but to reinforce hierarchy. Online, strangers provoke explanations simply to watch people unravel. In all cases, the same structure emerges. The explicable becomes the defendant, and the listener becomes the judge. Psychologically, this dynamic is powerful. When you accept someone as a judge, you implicitly elevate them above you. Their opinion matters more than your internal certainty. Even if they never explicitly claim authority, your explanation grants it. You are saying, without words, you have the right to assess me. That is why explanations often feel draining and humiliating. After the fact, you sense the imbalance, even if you can't articulate it. From a Machiavellian perspective, this is a critical mistake. Power belongs to the person who does not need to persuade. Persuasion implies uncertainty. It implies that outcomes depend on approval. Dominant figures rarely justify themselves, because justification invites scrutiny, and scrutiny is a downward force. Those at the top do not explain every decision. They allow ambiguity to work in their favor. Silence, brevity, and refusal to engage preserve their position. Explaining yourself also invites further questioning. Once you open the door, it does not close. Each answer creates a new angle, a new detail to dissect, a new weakness to probe. What began as a simple clarification turns into an interrogation. The more you explain, the more material you provide. This is why arguments escalate instead of resolving. Explanation feeds the conflict rather than neutralizing it. Manipulators understand this instinctively. They ask innocent questions not to learn, but to extract. Every justification reveals emotional priorities, fears, values, and limits. With that information, pressure becomes precise. A person who does not explain is difficult to control because there is nothing to grab onto. A person who over-explains is transparent in the most dangerous way. There is also an emotional signal embedded in explanation: dependency. When you feel compelled to justify yourself, you reveal that disapproval affects you, that you need to be seen as reasonable, fair, or good. This need creates imbalance. People respect those who can withstand misunderstanding. They exploit those who cannot. The irony is that the more you try to be understood, the less authority you command. Consider a professional setting where someone questions a decision you made. A long explanation sounds cooperative, but it subtly reframes you as uncertain. A calm, minimal response maintains control. Or think of personal boundaries. When someone challenges them, and you rush to explain why your boundary is valid, you invite debate. You turn a boundary into a proposal, and proposals can be rejected. Attackers and provocateurs crave explanations because explanations create movement. Silence frustrates them. It denies them engagement, denies them dominance. Explanation gives them what they want: emotional reaction, verbal material, and proof that they matter enough to affect you. Clarity is rarely the goal. Leverage is. In power dynamics, what is left unsaid often carries more weight than what is spoken. The person who can remain composed, unreactive, and uninterested in validation occupies the higher ground. Explanation lowers you into the arena where every word can be used against you. Silence is often misunderstood as weakness, avoidance, or lack of confidence. In reality, silence is one of the most effective tools of authority and control in social dynamics. When an accusation is made or tension enters a conversation, most people rush to respond. They feel the discomfort of the pause and try to relieve it with words. But silence does the opposite. It transfers discomfort outward. It creates pressure, and pressure forces movement. Psychologically, silence unsettles people because it disrupts expectation. Human interaction runs on prediction. When someone confronts you, they anticipate defense, denial, or explanation. Silence breaks that script. The brain searches for meaning in the absence of response and often fills the gap with self-doubt. Did I overstep? Did I misjudge? Did I reveal too much? In that moment, the emotional labor shifts. Instead of you managing the situation, the other person begins managing their own anxiety. Biologically, silence slows the exchange while heightening awareness. The nervous system becomes alert. Without immediate feedback, the mind scans for threat or error. This uncertainty is uncomfortable, and most people cannot tolerate it for long. They try to regain control by talking, clarifying, softening, justifying themselves. In doing so, they expose intentions, insecurities, and hidden agendas that would have remained concealed if you had rushed to respond. Silence also functions as frame refusal. Every accusation, insult, or passive-aggressive comment carries an implied narrative. You did something wrong. You owe an explanation. You must engage on my terms. When you respond verbally, you accept that frame. When you remain silent, you reject it without argument. You are not agreeing or disagreeing. You are refusing to enter the courtroom altogether. This is a deeply Machiavellian principle. Power is maintained not by winning every exchange, but by choosing which exchanges deserve recognition. Machiavelli understood that ambiguity protects authority. Clear explanations lock you into positions that can be attacked. Silence preserves optionality. It keeps motives opaque and intentions unreadable. People cannot easily manipulate what they cannot interpret. A silent presence forces others to project, and projection often reveals more about them than any response you could give. In practical terms, silence compels others to over-explain. When met with no reaction, many people begin filling the void, adding details, disclaimers, or emotional cues. Others backtrack, softening their original stance, unsure if they went too far. Some escalate emotionally, mistaking silence for resistance, exposing volatility and loss of control. In each case, the silent person gains information without giving any away. It is important to distinguish between reactive silence and dominant silence. Reactive silence comes from fear being frozen, intimidated, or unsure. It is inwardly chaotic and often followed by delayed explanations or apologies. Dominant silence is chosen. It is calm, grounded, and intentional. It does not avoid the interaction. It controls the tempo of it. The difference is internal state. One is absence. The other is presence. Consider an accusation delivered casually, disguised as concern. A verbal defense validates the accusation. Silence forces the accuser to sit with their implication. Or an insult framed as a joke, laughing it off, or explaining your perspective keeps you in their game. Silence removes the reward. The moment stretches, and the joke collapses under its own weight. In power struggles, especially subtle ones, silence denies escalation. It communicates that you are not emotionally accessible for manipulation. Silence is also effective against passive aggression. When someone makes a pointed remark, hoping to provoke a reaction, silence starves the tactic. Without engagement, the behavior loses function. The person either clarifies, revealing intent, or withdraws. Either outcome favors the one who stayed silent. This is not about being cold or superior. It is about restraint. Silence is an active choice to preserve position, energy, and authority. It signals that you are not compelled by accusation, not hurried by discomfort, and not dependent on validation. In social hierarchies, the person who can remain composed in silence often occupies the highest ground because they are not controlled by the need to respond. Every explanation you give is information released into the environment. It may feel harmless, even clarifying, but in social power dynamics, information is leverage. When you explain yourself, You reveal what you value, what you fear, and what affects you emotionally. You show where pressure works. To a manipulative or opportunistic person, this data is more valuable than the explanation itself. Manipulators rarely want understanding. They want access. An explanation provides entry points, beliefs that can be challenged, emotions that can be triggered, priorities that can be exploited. Once they know what matters to you, they know where to push. A calm statement without justification offers little to work with. A detailed explanation becomes a map. This is why explanations often lead to shifting goalposts. You clarify one point, and suddenly another detail becomes the issue. You resolve that, and a new concern appears. The interaction never stabilizes, because stability is not the goal. Control is. Each explanation invites a deeper level of scrutiny, and with each level, your position weakens. You are constantly responding, never setting terms. Over time, this dynamic erodes respect. People rarely admire those who feel compelled to justify themselves. Instead, they begin to see them as negotiable. Someone who explains too much teaches others that access is easy, that boundaries are flexible, and that authority can be challenged without consequence. Once that pattern is established, questioning becomes habitual. Disrespect becomes normalized. From a Machiavellian perspective, this is predictable. Power lies in being observed, not exposed. The more visible your reasoning, the easier it is to anticipate your moves. Predictability makes control efficient. When others can foresee how you will react, explain, defend, accommodate, they can design interactions to produce that outcome. Ambiguity, on the other hand, forces caution. People are more respectful when they are unsure how far they can go. One common manipulation tactic is provocation, disguised as curiosity. A question is framed as concern, confusion, or moral interest. The target explains, believing they are clearing misunderstanding. In reality, the questioner is gauging reaction, tone, and emotional charge. If the explanation comes quickly, with intensity, it signals vulnerability. That signal is remembered and reused.